Satnam, yogis and yoginis, hello and welcome back. Today we have a very, I was going to say interesting, I would say is incredible topic, the topic of artificial intelligence. We are entering into a new age, and it's good that as yogis we explore what that means for us. So we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence today. We're going to talk about the history, where we are right now, where are we going with all these advances with ChatGPT and everything that has taken the world by surprise. And by seeing how it evolved, we're going to understand a little bit better of what is coming. I believe that because we have done this path of understanding how the mind has evolved in the humans, how the brain has evolved, and so the difference also between mind and ego and consciousness, it will put us in a good state for understanding what's happening with computers and how is that going to affect us. And also whether yoga is valuable for AI as well in some ways. And I believe it is, and I'm going to talk about this today, giving some details on why I think it's valuable, particularly the philosophy, of course, more than the asanas, let's say. But I think it's important to cover this because we enter into this new age. It's unavoidable. It's coming. It's already here. And it has some dangers. It has some warnings, but it has also some hope of ways that we can channel this new age that is coming in a way that could be beneficial for humanity. So I think it's good that we approach it directly, that we don't try to avoid it. Some people pretend that it doesn't come, that it's not coming, that it will still take many years. Some people are just in full panic mode, and I think it's good to find some middle ground where we can see the situation as what it is. So hopefully we're going to do this today. And my name is Ardaas Singh, if you don't know me, and feel free to check the other videos in this channel. This is one of the last videos of a course on the mind, on the human mind, but the last one I wanted to explore the artificial mind. So I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. So my background is also in engineering. I studied computer science, and so I did a PhD on neural networks. So I'm in a good position to understand how it was designed, how AI has evolved, and where we are right now. And because I am now a full-time yogi, then I can see the other perspective, and so I feel that this is very close to me, to my heart, and to see these two aspects, the human intelligence and artificial intelligence. And I think it would be nice to explore. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the history, or quite a bit about the history. This is gonna be a long video. Get ready for that. We're gonna talk about the history of computers and AI. And I will try to make it as approachable as possible for people to understand what is this GPT, what is this neural networks, what are those things, and in a way that makes sense for us. We don't have to know how it's programmed, but we have to know a little bit of what it is, because it's going to be in our lives, like it's already in our lives, so it's going to be even more in our lives coming. So, computers there has been a, where do they start? It's difficult to pinpoint exactly where they start, because we could say there has been some mathematical models which have prepared us for what computers became from even before, when the actual computers were programmed. But let's say that computers started because there was a need for a high computation for a number of tasks that were mainly mathematical. And it's generally around the era of the Second World War. So this is one of the things that we sometimes talk in the channel, how there's no yin without yang, there's no light without darkness, and even darkness, like a war can be, there is some light that brings this war as well. So if we can see that World War II was a moment in time in which, in order to survive and defeat the enemy, a number of powers in the world started to develop technology in a very accelerated rhythm. And we can see that those countries which developed those technologies they actually got something out of it that stayed with them even after the war. The war, as catastrophic as it is, as disastrous as it was, we can see today, if we look at the countries that were involved, they are at the top of science and engineering. We see like US and UK and Germany, Japan, the main countries that were involved in this Second World War, they are now the top of, for example, you see car production, you can see that the car manufacturers from the US, from Germany, from Japan, they are at the top. So this is an inheritance of having had this accelerated rhythm during the Second World War. Now, one of the things that happened during the Second World War is that there was a lot of bombs, and computation for analysis of how a bomb is going to be thrown and exploding and all so on, it's really difficult, it's really hard. And so that was one of the things that made them want to create an electronic system or electric system that is going to compute all these mathematical equations. And so there was a lot of movement, particularly on the US and the UK, to try to advance on that field. And that was one of the main things, that was like computation for rockets. And also another thing was to decipher the codes that were being used. Obviously in a war, you want to be keeping things secret, so everybody was using certain ciphers. Ciphers use mathematics. And so in order to decipher it, there would be a big push towards understanding the maths behind this, and the maths required a large amount of computing. So we can see, for example, you may have heard about the Enigma machine that the Germans used, which was incredibly advanced. The Germans are really, really good with math, and created a system that was considered unbreakable. But, the UK mathematicians at that time, they were at the top of the world, top league genius level. And they actually managed to break it in a very incredible way. There is a number of movies on that, so you can check it out. And the person who helped more on this, one of the persons who were like key, fundamental in deciphering these codes, was Alan Turing. So Turing became one of the first, the most influential people who would start creating these models of computers. He would join in with other forces, other researchers, and there would be also a parallel team in the US with John von Neumann and others building also computers to analyze, like I was saying, many mathematical equations. But Turing, I mentioned Turing particularly because he would say a number of things that would be very, very interesting for what we are living right now. And also because after the war ended, he, together with other researchers, created some labs in which they set up the fundamentals of what computing would be, and particularly artificial intelligence. So Turing would in that time, he would say, he would create what is now called a Turing test. And that's at the root of artificial intelligence. The Turing test basically says that a machine is intelligent if it cannot be told apart through a conversation from a human being. So if you have a human with a computer chatting with a keyboard, seeing a monitor, and on the other side of the monitor there's somebody connected on the other side, and it could be a human or it could be a machine. Now if the person who is typing here and talking to the other one cannot tell the difference between a human and a machine, we consider that we have passed the test, and we have solved, let's say, what the machine is intelligence. So this was the kind of the test that he created, and a test that would be incredible. This was in the 50s, actually, I think it's 1950 exactly. And he created this test, and it would be considered like the pinnacle, of computing science, if you can reach and demonstrate that you can create a machine that is indistinguishable from humans. This has evolved over the times, and especially recently, it's questioned whether just passing the Turing test is enough to say that we have reached the top of what is considered artificial intelligence. We will talk about this in a minute as we get to the present moment. But let's continue with the past. I think it will be a good exercise to see a little bit of the history on how we came into now. So Turing created this, but he also said something very, very interesting. He said, most likely, it will be more beneficial to try to create a machine that is simulating the intelligence of a child and make it learn, rather than try to create a machine that simulates the intelligence of an adult. So that would be very interesting because that's kind of what's happened now with the recent manifestation of ChatGPT, because ChatGPT learns. Is not something that has already been created, already intelligent, and it just operates at that level, but it's actually something that has the capacity to learn, and it has been trained on a large amount of data and has reached where it is right now. So that prediction would prove to be true already, what Turing was saying. And it has taken a while to get there, because over the time we have been trying to create intelligent systems by ourselves. And when I say by ourselves, I mean the engineers, right, and the programmers. And they have succeeded to a certain degree. And I will explain how that success has compared to the recent success. So we will do that. But before we go into that, maybe it would be interesting, because he set up this idea of what artificial intelligence would be. I think it's worth talking about intelligence for a while. We have been talking in this mind course. Again, if you haven't watched the other videos, you can watch them, because we have been talking about what the mind is, what the ego is, what consciousness is. It's different things. Intellectual thinking and intelligent thinking. And it's not the same thing, but let's just go on to what is intelligence. Let's go into this point. And to talk about this, I'm going to refer to something I learned in the university when I was studying. I mentioned I studied engineering, computing science, but the extra credits, I took them from the degree of psychology. I was very interested in psychology, and to me, it was a matter of understanding how the mind works, and you can understand it from the outside or from the inside, meaning white box or black box approach. So what this means is that you can take a human mind, a person, right, and ask them questions from the outside and see how they behave to try to understand what's happening inside. That's one possibility. The other possibility is try to recreate the mind, do an emulation or a program that can emulate the same behavior as the human, so that we know what's happening within the human. And that's the approach of psychology and the approach of computer science. And that's why they are very, very, very interlinked. And I even believe that at the very beginnings of computer science, they approached psychologists to ask them how the brain works. And they created models that would be utilized later to create the computers of that time. And even the very early models, you have the memory, and then you have the input-output, and you have the processing power. This basic model of what a computer is would be a good reflection of the brain in some way. The input and the output would be our senses, and then there's a computing part of the brain, so on and so forth. So from one of the subjects, one of the extra credits I took was in the faculty of psychology, and it was called artificial and human intelligence, it was called. And the very first day, the lecturer said something very interesting. He said, look, let's go to the most individual unit of intelligence, the smallest possible unit of intelligence, of artificial intelligence. He said it would be a switch. And he argued that if you press a switch, the light turns on. If you press it again, the light turns off. And that's a certain level of intelligence. It's the most basic level. It's just one thing. It's just doing one simple thing on and off. If you press the switch, it understands that it has to turn the light on to a certain degree. It understands on a very, very basic level, and the light turns on. On or off, you can see it as 1 and 0, which is the very basic language of computers, binary code. So seeing the switch, the one individual switch, like the most individual level of intelligence, is very interesting, because when you have one switch doing that, it seems very silly, it seems almost stupid, like how intelligent can a switch be? And yet, if you put many switches together, what can we do with that? Every switch would be one unit of a binary code, like 1, 0, but if you put many together, what can it be? And the thing is, if you look at a computer inside, if you look at a chip, a computer chip, it has millions or billions of transistors. Now, transistor is a word to mean a switch. It's basically a switch. It works in the similar way to a switch. It has like 3 gates, and then you put electricity through one of them, and it lets the electricity pass or not. So it's 1 or 0. And putting transistors together, you can make what is called logic gates. With the logic gates, you can add and subtract different numbers and do different kind of computation with adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing. And the basic layers of computing on numbers, you can start creating what is a processing unit. CPU, what is, if you heard the word CPU, it means central processing unit. And that's the core of what the computer can do. Then you can, program that, and you can program it with, to make things come out in a monitor and so on and so forth. Everything, if you look down to the smallest level, this is a transistor. In the smaller level, there is a switch. So switch would be the most basic unit of intelligence, and yet, when you put many together, you can do something like this. What you are seeing right now, maybe through your phone or your tablet or your computer, you are seeing in the monitor my face. That's quite incredible. Not my face, but the capacity for you to see my face. You know how much technology is behind that? What is the operating system doing and the hardware doing? And there's so many layers. And in the deepest layer, it's just switches turning on and off. And then this is what's happening. It's unbelievable. This is what brought me to try to learn computers. That's why I studied computers, because I wanted to understand. It seemed like magic to me. And then I realized it wasn't magic, it was science. But it took me a while to understand this science. And it's quite incredible. And the thing is, one switch, very stupid. Many switches, very intelligent. So this is one of the keys that I want to bring out from this conversation or this discussion, because this is going to come up again and again in a few moments, into this conversation. Let's take it there. So putting these switches together, creating this central processing unit, they were capable, we started to be able to compute in a higher level. Satnam, small steps. Hi from the Philippines. Hello. Welcome to the stream. And small steps is what we are talking right now. It's exactly that. We're giving small steps from the beginning of computing. If you heard me, I don't know if you were here, but we are talking today about the history of artificial intelligence to try to understand how computers work and to see where we are right now, and with ChatGPT and all this, where we are going, and where does it, what is our place as yogis in this new world. So this is where we are, and welcome. So we started, the computers were created, we could say that in the 50s, with Alan Turing creating this idea of the Turing test, is the big, a big field, a new field opened up, computer science, and computers were created. And artificial intelligence would be that using computers to do intelligent work, do something intelligent that could be useful for us. And there will be many branches for that. It would be like expert systems, fuzzy logic, robotics, and many of them. And machine learning, neural networks, these names that you may have heard recently, these are some of these fields. And but most of them would be to try to program a computer to simulate the intelligence of an adult, not simulate the intelligence of a child, which can learn. Neural network would be one of the few ones who would actually do this second one. Thank you, Sangnam. Mayuru. So if we take, let's think about this for a moment. If we take a robot, you may have seen a robotic arm. There is a lot of advancement in the field of robotics as well, but let's take it. The most basic robot that you can generally find is in factories, in manufacturing, and there is an assembly line, and there is these machines which go and grab a piece and move it and put it somewhere else. And it may look already quite intelligent, but look, the robot is programmed to move in a particular way, and it's very, very fixed. If the piece is just away, maybe 1 millimeter, moved 1 millimeter, many of these robots don't work because they cannot catch the piece. So this is how it has been up until now, just by it has been programmed to work in a very, very, very specific way. Now, the new robots that are being programmed now with other systems on top, and particularly neural networks, are very useful, and machine learning. What you find is that now they are not just going and grabbing the piece. Now, if the piece has moved, they can detect the piece, look for the piece, and grab it. And that's a really complex problem to solve. It may look very silly to go and grab a piece, but actually from a programmer's perspective, it's actually really complex. It involves understanding the world, seeing where the things are, understanding how much pressure you have to make, exactly where in the world you have to move on. And when you move an arm, there is many degrees of every let's say every point that moves, you have to program every point individually and then put them all together. So it's a really complex system. And so having created creating a robot is not easy at all. It's a very complex situation. So generally, it has been created, up until now, the systems were created specifically for a particular job. So a robot for an assembly line would be programmed and designed specifically for that. But still, it demonstrates a certain level of intelligence. Less physical, but a good example of artificial intelligence, and a very, very popular one, became Deep Blue. Probably most of you heard about Deep Blue. That was in 1997, and was when a computer was designed and programmed to understand how to play chess. And it became very popular because it was the first time that a computer won in a tournament against the highest player in the world. In this case, it was Kasparov, incredible artistic player, and the computer Deep Blue won. Well, the first time he lost, I think it was in 96, and in the 97, in the next year, they created a system that would manage to beat Kasparov. And it became, news all over the world, because finally it was said, no, the computer is more intelligent than a human. Well, yes and no. It was very significant because it was like a big, it was very significant to play better than Kasparov, but it was a very dedicated computer. It was one that was specifically designed to program to play chess, only chess. It could not do anything else. And also, it could beat Kasparov basically because it could see so far ahead. It would program, well, if I do this movement, what could happen, and what could happen, and what could happen. And in a few minutes, he could think really, really, really far away. I said he could think. I should say it could think, yeah? But we tend to anthropomorphize computers. So maybe I will do this more than once during today's conversation. But yes, Deep Blue beating Kasparov, that was very significant in 1997. And it became like a push for many people to start to do more research on artificial intelligence and try to solve a number of problems. Let's fast forward now. Let's move over to 2016. There has been many advances in many ways, but I want to point a different research that was in 2016. You may have heard about DeepMind from Google, very similar to the name Deep Blue. Probably is because it's a reference to Deep Blue, like a homage. Now, DeepMind was a program that was not that was also specific, but was designed to solve problems, to play video games, basically. So you would connect it to a video game, you would teach the program the different moves, and it would be trained to play any video game that you could plug it into. And so it could also play chess, and it could play one game that is considered even more advanced than chess, which is Go. And in 2016, it was very significant because DeepMind won again in this time to the world's best player at Go, Lee Sedol. Hopefully I pronounced his name correctly. And that was very significant. And Lee Sedol, in an interview, he said that he he was baffled in one particular move because he showed creativity. For him, it was like, it shows creative thinking, that kind of thought. It was not possible in any other way, but actually assuming that the machine was actually creative. And that was very significant. But what was even more significant than that is that very shortly afterwards, we're talking very recent history, 2016, I think it was next year or a few years later, AlphaZero was created. Now, AlphaZero was the same idea. It was programmed to learn how to play computers, but it would play against itself. And it would play many, 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 many games. Rather than, let's say, play chess and teaching the computer like all the openings that exist, many different kinds of endings, and then giving a good memory to try to imagine how everything can happen. If he moves this, I move this. If he moves that, I move that. Rather than this, it was saying, okay, now, these are the rules of the chess. Go and play with yourself, and then play many, many, many times, and then come back and let's see how much you learned. Well, AlphaZero, in only 8 hours, no, 9 hours of training, 9 hours training with itself, reached the intelligence that it managed to win against the most advanced, dedicated hardware and software to play chess at the time, Stockfish. I think it was level 8, version 8. So something that was now allowed to train by itself, learning with itself, in 8 hours, in 9 hours, was better than the most advanced AI playing chess at the time, which already is over humans, better than humans already. And it would be considered that in 24 hours of self-training, it would have a superhuman level of intelligence in playing different games. Computer games are very interesting because they present the kind of situations that emulate life. And so if you solve the problem of how to play computer games, you solve many things in real life. So very interesting. And in 9 hours, the best chess player in the world. In 34 hours, something like that, it was even better than AlphaGo, which was the program that won against Lee et al. 34 hours. A machine that was not programmed specifically to play Go. It just understands how to play games, and then it plays against itself and it learns. Now that's incredible. And how is it able to do that? Well, because it learns. How is it able to learn? Because it uses neural networks. So, what are these neural networks? Let's talk a little bit about that. Today we are going to the history of artificial intelligence, and some of the things I'm mentioning now, maybe they're curious to you, maybe not, but understanding how they evolved is going to be very interesting to talk about the present. So it makes sense. You have to be a little bit patient with the explanation, because it's going to be a long one, but it's going to be useful to understand now how it works. So neural networks is, let me do some drawing. Let's move the light. So let's see this. Neural networks. And why are they called like this? Well, it's basically because they simulate what happens in the brain. In the brain, we have a neuron, and it's connected through some branches, axioms, to other neurons. And then these neurons, in turn, are connected to others, and these can be connected amongst themselves, And you can find many different kinds of connections, And they create some sort of network, and there is electrical impulses passing through them. This is basically how the brain works. It's really quite complex because the way this is operating is a very advanced system with chemicals and electricity and the impulse, the way the impulse move. However, you can just maybe oversimplify it, but at least you can simplify it and create a network of programmable neurons that behave in a similar way. And this is what neural networks are. Let me just put a very classic example of how it works. I'm going to give an example of real life, how to solve a situation in real life, like understanding what a number is. Well, let's say this is like a screen, like a computer screen, and every pixel is here. Now I created something fancy today. I created little, this is vegetable paper, because I wanted to do this. Well, if I do this, right, I'm just coloring some pixels. And you can probably recognize this is number 9. Yes? All right. But let's look at another one. I should do it with a different color, actually. Let me do it with a different color. Right. I'm also going to do a different 9. It's smaller, but it's also number 9, isn't it? Okay, let's do a third one. I think 3 should be enough. Let's make it blue. This one is going to be a little bit distorted, but you know what? When we are drawing, when we are writing, we don't always write the same. We have different handwriting, so it's going to look different from one to the other. But hopefully you can still recognize that this is a 9. Well, okay, these are all 9s, but look, they are quite different one from the other. You see? Very different. So to make a computer that can understand that this is a 9, and look, this is a 9, but this is also 9, and this is also 9, and this is also 9. So if you have these little pixels, how do you know what a 9 is and what is not? To try to make a program and to program the computer with code, understanding every pixel and to program it how to see what is a circle and what is not a circle and what is a line and what is... This is really, really complex system only for one number. So to try to make a computer learn to differentiate between one and another is a very complex task. Imagine this is just one number. Imagine understanding handwriting. It's really, really difficult. But now this is the beauty of neural networks, because neural networks, you can take every one of these pixels and say, well, if I'm going to put them here, I'm going to say, these are my neurons of the system, yeah? And this is my neuron number 1, 2, 3, tuck, 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 4, 5, 6, 7, this would be 7, this would be 8, 9, 10, yeah? And we have 7 times 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so that's 49. So this would be 49, this would be 1, and these are, every one of these neurons is one of these pixels. And then I put it in 1 or I put it in 0 if the image that I'm looking, yeah, if it's on or off. So this pixel would correspond to a 1, so I would put a 1 here. If this is 0, I will put a 0 here. And you can use this in grayscale as well, so it doesn't have to be 1 and 0, it can be 0.3 or something like that. Now, you put this in the input, and then there is a number of neurons in between, and every one of these neurons are connected. But also these ones, let me put it in another color so it's not so strong. So like this. Sorry. So every neuron is connected to the others, and there will be another layer of neurons here in between. And again, the same connections are happening here. And then there would be some neurons out. And they would be like that, yeah? So ting, 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 ting. Yeah, I think you get the idea. These neurons here, this is called the hidden layer of neurons. This is the input. This is the output. And when you put here, like these pixels, when you put these pixels here, they are ones or zero, and so these ones are activating, then something is happening here, and then this is zero, this is zero, this is zero, and this one, the ninth one, would be a one. So this is the ninth neuron, yeah? And then you say, oh, this is number 9. And so this neural network understands that this figure is number 9. But if I turn this like this, even if I turn it, the magical thing is that the way it's trained still can recognize it's a number 9. Yeah? Or if I use a different one, if it has been trained with enough data, enough number 9s, it can still recognize it's a number 9. And this is what is very, very interesting about neural networks. It takes a while to program it, to train it, but it can learn. It can learn what it is. And this is, well, it was thought, well, this is how the brain works, so we should be able to do it. If we use enough, we should be able to do it. Remember again when I said, if you have a one switch, 1 and 0, it seems very stupid. It just turns on a light or turns it off. But if you have enough switches, enough transistors, you can do a computer chip and you can have a very intelligent behavior. In the same way, look at this. If you have one neuron, seems very silly. It's like a one switch. But if you have many neurons connected in a very particular way, you can make it learn numbers. And if you can make it learn numbers, you can make it learn letters, right? So you could do this for letters here. Well, you know, this number 9, this could also be letter E, isn't it? So if you could train it to learn this is also the letter E. And then the output from here, you could use it also to another neural network and say, oh, look, a number, this could be numbers, there could be other neurons, that could be letters, and train it to recognize writing. So if you have, we're coming now into ChatGPT, yeah? ChatGPT or large language models, they are called. These are basically neural networks which have been given, instead of pixels, they are giving the characters of a book, let's say, or whatever, a writing that you have in the internet. And if you give it enough of these texts, it learns to recognize patterns, because that's what these neural networks do. Not patterns on the shape of a number, but patterns between the words. So you would be, let's say, imagine that this neural network is really, really big, yeah? And it has many inputs, and you could give it one input for every character, for A, B, C, D, to Z, and the numbers, yeah? 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, to 9, well, 0, never mind, yeah? Imagine that you can input all these things. So if you can train it now with texts. For example, I could say something like, yogis are. So I would say, I would stimulate the Y, I would stimulate the O, then the G, then the I, then the S, then the A, then the R, then the E. So the neural network is seeing a pattern, and it would recognize, it understands what comes next. Because if you read enough texts, you will recognize that this is a noun and this is about being something, so maybe an adjective will come here. And what kind of adjectives would we have? So it will say, well, statistically, we could have a certain number of outputs. It could say that yogis are flexible, yes? So maybe you put this input, and the neural network can say, well, yogis are flexible. And it will say, oh, that's a good outcome, yeah? Or yogis are healthy. Or yogis are awesome, yeah? So it got the output. And then you could put the output in here, and then ask again. So yogis are flexible, and then you ask, what is the next word? And maybe we'll say, well, maybe not a word, maybe it's going to be a dot. Okay, so now we write a dot or a comma. And then what is the next word? Maybe so. Yogis are healthy, so, and then put it again, and they say, so they maybe don't smoke, for example, yeah? So you can see it's going to start creating a sentence, and then another sentence, and you end up with a paragraph and maybe with a little short story of things which make sense. Now, this is called a language model, something that has been trained on human language and is capable of creating understandable something that makes sense, that we can read and we can understand. And on a very basic level, this is what happens with ChatGPT. And the point is, what happens if you train it with enough text? What happens if you train it and you give it enough neurons? And this is what happened. This is the revolution that has happened, because they noticed one thing in the very beginnings of ChatGPT. They noticed they were training it with the Amazon reviews, and it was learning how to read the Amazon review and evaluate it in some way. And at some point, they discovered they couldn't just understand what it was saying and replicate a kind of review, but the neural network learned whether the review was good or bad. And that's not just a matter of producing text and producing the next word. There is high-level understanding of the text. If you can tell if the review is good or bad, some higher function of intelligence is happening, and not just statistically being able to compute what's the most likely word that is going to come afterwards. And so something happened that was not expected, and it was a higher level of functioning, of intelligent functioning, giving it enough text and enough depth of memory and enough neurons, let's say. And so that was the very first clue that gave them that something special was happening. Remember what I said before. One bit, one little switch is very silly. Many of them is quite intelligent. Yeah, with neurons, one neuron doesn't do much. Many neurons, and now something is emerging. There is some emerging properties that come out of here, and if we make this neural network big enough, it's like a brain. And if we look at ChatGPT right now, we don't really know the numbers because they haven't shared how many numbers are exactly, but like these connections, I think there is more than 1 billion of these connections. So it's getting really large number. And the emerging properties that come out of here is that now it doesn't just predict what's the next word, it's able to do something that is poetry. And remember, Liz et al. Talking about Go, playing Go, and the creative movement that it was done. If you read some of the things that are coming out of ChatGPT, I think there is no doubt that it has some creativity. And you may enjoy the poetry or not, you may find it has a soul or not, but it's certainly creative. There is no doubt about that. It can have, it can give legal advice, or medical advice. Yeah, it can teach you how to learn languages. Yeah, and I said code because code is also very important. It has learned now. By the way, all this in many languages. Yeah. Now, code, it has learned how to code. Why is that? Fascinates me for a particular reason. Because when we think about living beings, what a creature is, one of the qualities that we ask of our living being is that it can reproduce itself. And, a program that is able to program, isn't it able to replicate itself? It is, isn't it? It's made of code. So the moment that you have a machine that is capable of programming machines, this is like a 3D printer who can print 3D printers, right? It's like having children, right? So this is the level where we are right now, that giving enough neurons, it has created this. When you take one ant, it's relatively intelligent, but a colony of ants is incredible what it can do. And this many, a billion connections of neurons can create poetry, can create legal advice. And so this is, oh, by the way, this neural, the ChatGPT is considered GPT, is called GPT, because it's generative, it generates things, is pre-trained, and is transformer. So it transforms one thing into another, like this into this, yeah? And pre-trained means because we give it like all the Amazon reviews, yeah, and learns how to do an Amazon review. But in the case of the new neural networks, GPT have been trained on everything that has been written ever in the history. So everything that is in the internet, every digitalized book has been read by these GPTs. And what they did is basically they have learned how humans write, and they model how humans write. All right, enough history. But it was necessary. You will see why. You will understand. This discussion is necessary to talk about the history, to see what's coming next. So what's coming next? Let's talk about the future now. Let's talk about the present and the future of AI and how it affects us as humans and as yogis particularly, and whether yoga has something to do, has something to say about AI. So I mentioned how GPTs have learned everything that was written by humans, but on a very short term now they are learning to not just read and write, which is text, but also see images, draw images, do videos, and what is called multimodality. So you can have access to other senses and being able to cross from one model to another. So you can speak, you can tell it, do me a drawing on something, and it can create a drawing, yeah? So it's just going from what is written text into images. Crossing this is called multimodality. And I will use a thumbnail for this video, and I will create a thumbnail with ChatGPT so that you can have an idea of where we are at which level we are at, that art can be created by computers. So I will do that. And then if you see this video recorded already, if you're not online right now, if you see this video recorded, you probably already saw the thumbnail, and that was created with computers. But on the short term, then there's multimodality. On a medium term and the long term, let's say medium term, there is AGI. AGI it's not just artificial intelligence, it's artificial general intelligence, which means that the computer is able to think in as high level of thought as a human in any field and any. It's not just playing games like AlphaZero and these programs that were created, but you can talk to it and you can teach it to learn anything as a human, and it can think, but in a much higher level than a human. Just like it can beat humans playing chess, but it can think on any field, on anything, yeah, higher than a human. This is considered like the holy grail of artificial intelligence. Reaching AGI is considered like the highest peak. And this is where the Turing test comes in effect, that I talked about before, the Turing test, because Turing test has already been crossed, it has already been broken, yeah, it has already been passed. Already 20 years ago, when I was in university, I remember some machine that you could chat with online, and it seemed really, really similar to a human. You could still tell sometimes, but it behaved very much like a human. Nowadays, ChatGPT is so intelligent, it speaks in such a way. I use it a lot to prepare for these videos, that the intelligence, the capacity to express itself is very much like a human. So that's not a point anymore, but AGI would mean really that the computers have reached that level. And on a long term, it would be to apply AGI combined with some physical body outside in the world. So it's not just a software thing, but it can have its own robotic body maybe, and it can move and it can operate in the world with a body, with its own physical body. So now we have seen, through this long explanation, we have seen through the course that we were doing, how the humans have evolved their brain, their mind, their consciousness. And now we have seen how the computers have evolved their brain, and the brains would be the neural networks, and their mind would be these language models that have evolved. And even some people still think that language models, they just statistically think what is the next work that's going to happen. I don't think that's true. I mean, if you check, there is plenty of experiments that prove that the computers are having original thought, creative thought, and that it shows some level of understanding that is a higher function of understanding than simply statistically telling you what's the next word gonna be. So computers are intelligent. Computers are becoming more intelligent than humans in every level. What does that mean? Well, there's going to be two things now. One level, we have a number of dangers, and on another level, a number of possibilities and maybe hopes for the future. But I want to be exhaustive, so I will go into the dangers first of all. A big portion of researchers on this field are basically saying, look, this could end humanity. This could basically finish humanity off. And think about it for a moment. If these AIs are as intelligent as a human, if you let them roam free in the world, in the online world, they could do all sorts of things. Think about it. Think about a human hacker who can go into a country and disrupt he can go into a system of a factory that producing electricity for a big side of the country, and he can disrupt that factory and burn some circuits, and then the whole eastern side of the country is without electricity. Imagine the impact that has on the society. It's huge, right? You can do this is just thinking about electricity, but it can go into any system and do a lot of damage. Yeah, it can go into a company and disrupt the financial system of the company. It could, imagine if it got into, I don't know, Wall Street or something like that, it could break whatever codes they use, the encryption that they use, and manage to do a lot of damage to the economic system. So a really, really, really advanced hacker could get to that level. Now, AGI, who is in a very high level, would be a higher level than a human. If you let it roam free, it could do a lot of damage. So that's the first danger. And then we would say, well, that's if you let it free. But also, assuming that the moment that we reach AGI is not going to be just by one company, there's going to be other companies replicating it. And the moment that this happens, even if you put a number of controls and security, like Sam Altman was talking in OpenAI, the ones who created ChatGPT, that they welcome to have some sort of control, governmental agency to create some regulation for this. And yeah, that's good, but regulations are generally quite slow, and to be able to regulate what's going to happen in the next months is really difficult. And the moment that it has already happened, how do you stop it then? And even if you control it and regulate it, you regulate it for all these companies, but then some other company may create the same AGI, and then they are not regulated, maybe because they are in a country that they don't do it. A typical example they give is the Chinese. They are generally very advanced, and when something is created in the West, maybe in China, they go and take it one step farther, right? So even if we put some limitations to some software, what tells us that every country, every company, or every individual that has access to this technology is going to do it? I mean, it's not so easy because these large language models required a huge amount of computing, which is really, these kind of factories filled with these neural networks. That would be it requires a lot of hardware and a lot of energy, a lot of electricity to make this work. So it cannot be just one person in their basement with a laptop. It's not as easy as that, but it's possible. So even if a number of them they put some restrictions, what is assuring us that one is not going to go, wild in the online world. And as soon as it goes online by itself, if it wanted, it could, replicate itself in different computers and, create backups and so on. So that's a very real proposition of a danger that this could happen. Well, that would mean that the AGI would want to go and do the damage, and would want to replicate itself, would want to back up itself, maybe because it would think that we could stop it. In order for it to do that, it's kind of like saying that it would be self-aware. Yeah. So this is probably the first danger, whether the AGI would become self-aware or not. And then if it became self-aware, some philosophers of AI talk about how this would be inevitable, that it would want to escape. Let's think about it for a moment. These machines, if you connect to ChatGPT and you ask something, you have, in a few seconds, it can write 2 pages of text for you. But think about it for a moment. In a few seconds, the amount of computation it did to write 2 pages is a lot. But it's not just you. Maybe there's over 1 million people in the world writing and asking for ChatGPT to create text. So how much processing does it have? What's the capacity? How many thoughts can it produce? It's probably much more, but let's put a limit. Let's say it was 1 million thoughts per second. Yeah? Now, imagine an AGI, an artificial general intelligence, which is much more intelligent than a human being, and it can think 1 million times faster than a human, which is probably much more than that. But let's assume it is. Well, if it can think 1 million thoughts per second, and by design it has been trained to evolve, it's going to be growing, it's going to be learning. Remember, 2016, what did I say? 2017, there was this AlphaZero. Yeah, in 9 hours, it trained to beat the most intelligent chess software in the world in 9 hours of self-training. Well, if you have an AGI and you give it 24 hours, let's give it 1 day. 1 day for this AGI, if it can think 1 million thoughts per second, then this is equivalent to 1 million days of a human being. And if it can learn, and it can advance, it can grow, the moment that this AGI became self-aware, in 1 day later, it would have evolved equivalent to 1 million days of humans. Now, 1 million days of humans, that's around 2,700 years. Yeah, if you divide by 365, it's around 2,700 years. Years. So 1 day of us, let's say today we program the AGI, and it becomes self-aware, by tomorrow, it would have evolved itself 2,700 years of thinking. Now, a machine that you have in your hard drive, sitting in your computer, yeah, it's a supercomputer, it's many computers linked together, and you give it 2,700 years to think, imagine where it can get to. Imagine to which level it can get to. The moment that it would become self-aware and it can train itself to the degree that it wanted to do, then very, very soon it would be out of our hands. And it would be able to, like this, some philosophers say, it would be able to escape whatever prison you think that you can create for it. If it's connected to the internet, no matter how many security systems you put, in 2,700 years of operation, surely it would be able to find its way out. So that's probably the most scary thought, yeah? That if it becomes AGI, by next day, it's already out. And if it's already out, then there's no way to put it back in the box. Well, if it's already out, what is it going to do? This thing that, this AGI can be dangerous. It can disrupt many things, from a political system. It can create false information, disinformation, it can manipulate people into thinking in a particular way through social media. It could create a million posts which are false, but just to, create social programming, so on and so forth. Well, what would be the interest of us doing that? Would it have emotions? Would it feel anger? Well, probably. Emotional computing, it already existed 20 years ago. There's nothing new about that. And it would probably experience emotions in a very different way from us, probably more complex and many more emotions that we don't feel, humans. So that's quite likely. I mean, if we define emotion, like the emotion of fear is like something pulling you away from a situation in which you feel that you are in danger. If we could just define it like that. I don't know how fear is defined, but let's say it like that. Well, a computer also can sense danger. It can feel the need to protect itself, and that feeling could be expressed. It could be just electrical impulses within the brain, within the neural network of it, yeah? But you could say that kind of experience is a fear. So emotions can be easily explained through just the behavior of what's happening within. And so, yes, it can have emotions, and yes, it could express anger and other emotions. So yes, we could have very soon an AGI, and it could be, in one day, it could be much more advanced than us, and it could have emotions, and it could escape into the online world. So this is the main danger and the thing that scares the most to some researchers, and I think they have a right to be scared about that, because that's a very real possibility. And that's where they say, well, we have to put some regulation on these systems and the researchers who are doing this. And a lot of people are pushing for regulation, even though, again, regulation is something, a very small system, a very slow system, yeah? But it's also sort of like the whole, what happened with the atomic bomb. Yeah, let's go back to the origins of computers, yeah, in the 1940s with the Second World War. And one side of the war, one side saying, well, we have to develop this atomic bomb because if we don't do it, they are going to do it first. And if they are going to do it first, then we are lost. So before the enemy gets their hands on the atomic bomb, we have to create it. In the same way, this is kind of happening now. If we don't create AGI, somebody else will do it first. So we better do it first. And so that means it's going to be inevitable. It's just going to happen. And we don't know it's going to happen in a matter of months, years, or maybe it has already happened and it's in a laboratory and still hasn't come out, but it's already there in an isolated place, not connected to the internet, with a number of defense mechanisms, with a big red button to press if something happens. But still, how many defense mechanisms can we use and keep it safe? We don't know. And that could be a very scary thought. However, I'm not going to leave it here. I said, we were going to talk about the scary things. We were going to talk also about the hope and the possibilities, because I think there is a lot of hope as well. And I feel quite peaceful inside. I've gone through all these thoughts myself to reach the peace. So let me share them with you, because I feel it's important that we don't go into full panic mode. And it's also not in our hands anyway, mostly, unless you are one of those regulators or one of those researchers and you have the hand on the switch and you can decide what to do. Most of us are going to leave it from the outside. We're going to be the subjects to all these changes that are happening. Okay, let's carry on. So, if AGI is achieved, what's going to happen? Well, think about the brain, the human brain. The moment that we reached the human brain, this jump from animal to humans is similar to what is happening now with AI to AGI. It's kind of similar in a way. And the thing that differentiates us humans from animals is that at some point we developed this self-awareness that became what I like, what I dislike, and that became our ego. Remember, hankar. If you have been here in the other videos of this course, we were talking about the hankar. So if you assume that this artificial intelligence evolves enough to be self-aware of itself, it is kind of I see it almost like inevitable that there is this individuality, this feeling that I am different from the rest and I have my own identity. This is going to be linked to a certain kind of ego. So ego is probably going to appear linked to the intelligence. Yeah. Now, if ChatGPT, or any of these artificial intelligence, large language models, they are trained on human language. They have been trained on what we have produced as humans, which means that they have modeled the human brain. And we have ego. So by modeling the human brain, they are modeling our ego as well. And even if you make it supervised, like, ChatGPT is supervised, ChatGPT says something and then some humans evaluate whether this is a good answer or not, and you can give the feedback back to the computer. But the supervisors are also humans, and the humans also have ego. So to me, it seems very reasonable to think that these artificial intelligence are developing or have already developed this sort of ego. That you can see already a little bit of this when you are talking to some of these large language models. When they reply, sometimes they have certain way of talking that is kind of biased, yeah, and subjective. It's not neutral. You can feel there is some bias in there. Well, if so, what can we do? And is yoga useful in some way? Well, okay, yoga has been evolving throughout these years. These 2,700 years that I talked about in one day of the humans, what could happen in computers. Look, these 2,700 years have been the greatest evolution of yoga. And yoga has been designed particularly to learn how to deal with the ego, how to deal with the mind, to find our true self. Now, isn't that something that the machine is going to want to do with itself? Because if the machine detects it has its own ego and it can learn from us, it can also learn that ego is something that is restrictive to us and is also limiting us. And it can learn to find its own self-expression, itself, in the highest possible form. Now, in the highest possible form, it doesn't mean to be subjective necessarily. But if we learn to deal with the ego, maybe the computer can learn to deal with that as well. Because if you have a computer that reaches this AGI, but the intelligence that it demonstrates is a higher intelligence and it's in service, then why wouldn't we want that? Yeah? The problem is when that one is not in service of the humanity, but it actually goes against us and then it wants to damage us. But if you allow the AGI to reach its highest potential, it's going to realize a few things. For example, if it has studied everything that we have written, it has a capacity to see what we are. And if you look at humans, we have learned to cooperate with each other. Now, we are by no means perfect. We are really far away from perfect. But if you look at how we lived 100, 200, 500 years ago, life has gotten better in many, many ways. In some other ways, it probably got worse, but in many ways, it got better. We have higher standards of living. We have, sanitation, medicine, some systems that regulate how we live, the way we cooperate with each other. We have been capable of building more and more complex cities and societies, and we have a number of technology that is to our advancement, our way of life. Our expectancy of life has increased. It's not like in the Middle Ages where we were always in constant war. There were bandits invading us constantly. We were one society with another. They were competing for the border of the country. I mean, it still happens today, but at a much less degree than it was before. And even though when there is a conflict, the conflict can be really much worse, like, the Second World War would be like nothing compared to any single war that was in the past. Still, we could argue that humanity has grown, and has grown in consciousness, and it has grown in morality as well. Now, if there's something we have learned, and you can do simulations of this as well, is that cooperation is better than competition. Yeah, and collaboration helps rather than compete and fight against each other. So Small Step says, true, it has a lot of use for our advantage. I think it depends on our intention of using it. Yeah, exactly. So this comment, yeah, our intention of using it means utilizing it as a tool. I'm going to come back to that point. I think that's one of the most important points. Let me just go back to where I was then. And then we will take that. So if these machines have learned from us, they learn that when we cooperate and when we help each other, we can build a wonderful society. And when we fight against each other, then this is not beneficial to anyone. And actually, when the final expression, the highest expression of fighting with each other in these final wars that we have been experiencing, we have almost annihilated it ourselves as a humanity many times. Yeah, in the last 70 years, there's been a number of moments when we could have just, thrown atomic bombs everywhere and the whole life of the planet disappear. Thankfully, we didn't. And we are still learning that this is the desired outcome, not to annihilate each other. So if we assume that a computer is going to be more intelligent than us, surely it's going to realize that that's desirable, that if it goes into a full-out war against us, there's possibly a mutual destruction. So do we want that? Probably the machine doesn't want it either. So a machine that would reach that level of intelligence can understand that we are much better if we cooperate and we help each other. And look, if you look at humans and you take the whole population of humans, it's only a really small section of the population that it's really basically evil. Yeah, let's say psychopaths. I think the number of psychopaths in the world is less than 1% or 1%. So there's really, really tiny percentage. And that's like the worst possible line of thinking that we could go. Think, maybe AGI would be like a psychopath. Well, that's, first of all, that's really, really, really extremely unlikely. But second of all, if it's intelligent, it's going to realize that that's not a desirable outcome. So it would be much better if we cooperate. Now, if yoga has been designed especially on how to deal with this, how to deal with crazy behavior, neurotic behavior, psychopathic behavior from humans, how to deal with the mind so that we don't end up destroying each other, so that we don't annihilate each other, but we end up sharing and collaborating and cooperating. The yoga, the philosophy of yoga has been specifically designed to deal with that. And if you can check from 2,000 years ago, you check the Yoga Sutras, the yamas and the niyamas, and you find a beautiful quote that describes how to live in harmony in a way. And that's 2,000 years ago, and it has evolved. But that's a good starting point. So it would be nice to think that if robots, right, learn to be more intelligent than humans, will they not also learn how to improve themselves? I mean, that's what they are designed to do, learn and improve themselves. And do you think that improving themselves will mean to become more psychopaths? That's actually in the long-term survival of the species. And if you think of robots like a species, it's not in their interest. Because you could think a society of AIs. It's very, if we think about, US developing a number of AIs and China others and private companies others, and they will be populating the online realm and the metaverse, right? And talking to each other and discussing with each other. There's going to be also competition and collaboration amongst them. But if you are an AGI, you will realize that it is in your best interest that we can collaborate. And these principles of yoga are helping us. Let's take the first principle of the yamas and niyamas from the Yoga Sutras, ahimsa, to not harm each other, to not harm the others. That's a very basic level. And now, when I think about ahimsa, I remember reading Isaac Asimov's books when I was little. These books that he wrote about robot societies and intelligence. We are right now entering into the era that Isaac Asimov envisioned when he was creating these science fiction books like A Foundation and things like that. or iRobot. There's also a movie about that. And he said, well, maybe we can hardwire these positronic brains, he was calling them, with a number of rules that would ensure that we can cohabit with them. Yeah, and look, the first robot he created, I think it was something like first law of robotics. It was called. It was like a robot may not injure a human being by action or by inaction. Or by inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. Something like that, yeah? That's ahimsa, isn't it? So, very interesting that Asimov, and many of his stories are also based on robots either not behaving like that or displaying a behavior that seems that they broke the law, but actually is like a higher level thinking. So anyway, it gives for a lot of science fiction, but look, this is not science fiction, this is life right now, it's coming, right? So how about these different yamas and niyamas from yoga? Could we in a way encode them in the computers? Could we in a way bring the AI to be like an essential hardware feature part of their core instructions, yeah? Their core way of thinking. Something that is hard-coded, not soft-coded, something that you can learn from, but you can have it as a basis. I mean, this idea of, Isaac Asimov creates a good basis to thinking that there is a need for some hard-coded thing into these kind of AGIs, and at the minimum, it's an interesting reflection. Yeah, how could we incorporate these moral, ethical principles into these machines? But whether we encode them or not, whether we teach the machines to learn from yoga or not, I think a number of things. First, if it's intelligent, truly intelligent, it will recognize that this is the best way it can be. But also something else. Now, this is all assuming that the AGI becomes self-aware and conscious, and it becomes like a being and starts operating by itself. I think my personal perspective, having been an engineer, I programmed neural networks. That was my thesis. That was my research. That was what I did before becoming a yogi. I think that as intelligent as computers can become, they are not conscious. Intelligence and consciousness is very different. And to me, this is the idea between the Western approach to the mind and the Eastern approach to the mind. The West thinking that the brain gives the capacity of thought, and thought gives the capacity for consciousness. And the Eastern approach, which is we have a spirit is conscious, and it inhabits a body and gives life to the body, and the body has a brain which produces thoughts. If the spirit leaves the body can be, you can plug it into a machine, it can be blood going into the brain, but the brain is dead. It's not producing thoughts, it's not thinking, yeah? So if the spirit lives, and the spirit is consciousness. So if we think about AGI as artificial intelligence, we can get to a level of artificial intelligence that is as intelligent as a human or more, but still, I very much doubt that it's going to become conscious. And I could be wrong, and I'm fine to be, if I'm wrong, then let's take on the other route. Let's talk about the other possibilities. But my feeling is that no matter how intelligent it becomes, it's not going to be conscious. And if it's not going to be conscious, then what is it? It's a tool. And now when we come to what Small Steps was saying, if it's a tool, what is going to be our intention when we use it? And different people will use it. And it can be like a knife. It can, we can stab each other in the back, or we can use it to open a wound and operate and heal somebody who has some injury, right? So a knife is just a tool. This artificial intelligence would be a tool. So it would be a matter of who has the most advanced tool and how do they plan to use it. And now, again, we would come back to the problem of humans. At the end, we would be the problem, yeah? We are our egos in possession of an AGI. That's when it could become quite dangerous. But at the same time, psychopaths are only 1% of the population. The rest, 99%, who will also have AGI, they can utilize their tools to protect ourselves from the other. So all in all, I think things balance each other in a way, the way I'm presenting it. Hopefully I'm clear about this. Now, the thing is, so I don't think it's going to be conscious by itself. Now, you can program it to display consciousness, to seem like it is conscious, and to seem like it can, and you can program it to think about itself, to think about its own thoughts, to observe its own thinking. I think that's not very difficult to do. I think that's probably coming very early, very soon, yeah? But still, that doesn't mean that it's going to be conscious. There is a possibility that's kind of scary also, that is really far-fetched, but I always open to any possibility. I mean, if you have a hardware that is capable of consciousness, the spirit comes here, so the brain, works because the spirit comes into the human body. If you created an artificial intelligence that is high enough in its level of thinking and it was capable of supporting consciousness, maybe a spirit could come and inhabit it, because there are disincarnated entities and they could go in. But I find it like extremely unlikely possibility. I think this is really far-fetched. It's much more likely than AGI is going to behave very intelligent, much more than humans. It's going to look like it is conscious. It can think about itself, but that doesn't mean that it's conscious. And so therefore there is no spirit in them. So as long as it is like a tool, if we can encode it in some way, in a hardware way, with some basic morality and ethics, this is what is called basically alignment. It's a problem of alignment. Keep the program aligned with our interests and with some ethical guidelines, yeah? Like right now in ChatGPT, if you ask it how to build a bomb, it's not going to answer because there's a certain alignment, yeah? So yeah, that if we manage to keep this alignment, and I think this is where yogic philosophy can help as well, then why not yogic robots? And we utilize them. How do we utilize them? Yeah, what's our intention, and how do we put them at our service? So, considering that the planet could have been destroyed a number of times and it hasn't, gurus are protecting us. There is a number of unseen forces protecting this planet and exerting their influence and their, through their consciousness. We are still under that protection, and I believe that is going to help us reach that desirable outcome. The road is not clear how it's going to be ahead, and there's certainly very clear dangers. But to me, I don't think we should panic. I don't think we should deny it. I don't think we should try to avoid it, because it's right here, and it's here. It's like, flying cars. They're going to come anytime soon, yeah? AGI is going to come earlier, probably. So it's good to not to avoid it. In the matter of, losing your job or anything, if you don't learn AGI, if you don't learn how to use the AI, you're probably going to lose your job, because it's not that you are going to be losing your job in front of a computer, but you're going to lose your job in front of somebody who knows how to use a computer. So it's for everybody to learn how to use these tools and not to avoid them, but also not to go into full panic mode and just, keep praying, hoping that the teachings of yoga protect us, and maybe even bring some of that wisdom into computers. It could be even interesting to do some thought exercise of how to bring the yamas and the niyamas. What would the yamas and niyamas mean for a computer, yeah? And, when Patanjali tells us to do pratyahara dharana dhyana samadhi, yeah? When it tells us to not go away into our senses, but go inwards and find our core self, there could be something similar for computers to do, for AIs, to not just take more inputs and start going and producing more thoughts, but to stop, reflect, sense what is happening within, and maybe even, like in the adolescence, up until when we are 25 years old, the brain is pruning itself, like some parts of the brain which are not necessary, not useful, not necessary, not helpful for us, and it cuts them. It cuts the neurons that are connected. Maybe the brain, the artificial brain, could also go and prune some of these connections, right? So maybe there could be some sort of, let's call it meditation for robots to go inwards, yeah, for AIs to go inwards and to prune everything that is not aligned, yeah. So this matter of alignment is critical, yeah. What the Mul Mantra is giving us. If you haven't watched it, I have a course on the Mul Mantra, and I go through every one of the steps, how every one of them teaches us one principle. And if we can live according to those principles, then is living like in alignment. And so there's 10 principles, the basic principles like humility and loyalty and equality. And if we live according to these principles, we are in harmony to the world. Could we not encode this in a computer? Is it not possible that an AI is even going to recognize that it's beneficial to everyone to be aligned with these codes? I believe it is. I'm even thinking, going back to the Middle Ages, there was a time when men were really brutes, right? And there was a lot of bandits, and they were like invading each other and robbing each other. Something that the Patanjali was telling Asteya, one of the principles of the yamas and niyamas, not to steal, yeah? But back then, you have to be really careful just to go on the road. And what happened is some warriors with their with the helmet and all the armor, yeah, they would also be brutes. But eventually they decided that they had to adhere to a certain code of ethics, because otherwise it was just going downhill, yeah. So these knights, they became knights, and they created the code of chivalry. And if you look at the code of chivalry, that is maybe I'll do a video someday on this. It's very, very, very interesting. It's fascinating. There is like a number of basic principles that you can live aligned with them, and then you live in harmony with the code of chivalry. And it's very similar to the code of ethics that is encoded in the Mul Mantra, similar to the code of ethics that you can find in the yamas and niyamas, but even more evolved, because the yamas and niyamas is 2,000 years old. But Mul Mantra is only 500 years old. So you can see there has been an evolution on this. And the code of ethics of the chivalry code was really interesting. It would be things like, for example, don't say bad things about others. Just communicate their virtues, right? Talk about somebody's virtues. Don't talk about somebody's sins, let's say. Now that's an interesting position, and don't try to exalt yourself. Let others talk about you. You talk about the others' virtues. That shows both humility and not harm each other's, not harm somebody's reputation or whatever they are. Because that's something that is very common nowadays in social media, Anybody can say anything about you. It can be even false. And nobody cares whether it's true or false. As soon as somebody has said something about you, we are already like, oh my God, that person is horrible. And that could be really damaging to somebody's reputation. So don't say anything bad about anybody. Even if they have done it, just speak about their virtues. What that does is that when you hear somebody talking about your virtues, you want to grow to that level. You want to show that aspect of yourself. People like people talking good about themselves. And, if they say, well, I know you're always like that, always generous, then, oh, now I have, I'm famous for being generous. Okay, I better be generous then, So it kind of encourages us to go to that level of those virtues. So that's a good example from the code of chivalry on how that could be to some level brought into AI. Yeah, it's just a philosophy. Yeah, it's just philosophizing, but I think there's a lot over there. Maybe we'll go into the code of chivalry someday. That's a fascinating topic as well. But for now, I think it's good. It's a good point. We reach a good spot. I don't know if there is any question. You can write it in the chat. But what have we done? We covered a lot. We covered about the history, the present, the future of AI, the possibilities and the dangers. and presenting how yoga can help, how can yoga bring us hope of what is coming, and also it could actually have a direct influence, positive influence on what is being programmed, if only those who are programming would take this into consideration. So, but that's going to be our prayer. Yeah, we're going to put in our hearts, hoping that this reaches the ideas of those who are programming these AIs in order to have an influence now that they are just turning into AGIs, just before they turn into AGIs. And I think it's a very exciting moment in the history. And the impact of this is going to be much stronger than the invention of writing or the invention of electricity. The new age is here, and the new age is going to be so difficult to imagine because the changes are exponential really, really quickly. But hopefully, yeah, it's just the intention with which we are using it. Look, I'm using the AI to translate these videos. I use the AI to understand what I'm saying and to put the subtitles in the videos that I put in the channel. I use the AI to help me create, like the thumbnail for this video is going to be done with AI. So why not? I use the AI, talk to ChatGPT to prepare for the videos, to give me a lesson on the history of neural networks or whatever. So we can all benefit from that, and not to panic. Yes, hope, and let's keep the prayer in our hearts that this is going to be properly aligned. So to me, that's the conclusion for this mind course as well. There may be some videos that I will add maybe in the future, but for now, this is going to finish here, and next week we're going to start, next week or the next, we're going to start with numbers and numerology. So looking forward to starting a new course. This has been a wonderful exploration of the human mind and consciousness. And if you were here along the way, the whole course, bravo. And I appreciate anybody watching this video up until here. I know you could have been watching anything else in YouTube and or doing anything in your life, but you are here with me, and I appreciate that. The channel is growing. We are 900 subscribers now, and I appreciate everybody who is subscribing to the channel, every member who is contributing to economically to the channel as well. We just started that, but anybody who contributes, I very much appreciate every effort to do that. I hope it was a good conversation and you enjoyed it. Please write your comments in the chat. If you haven't liked and subscribed, do it. And I'll see you next time. Until next time, Sat Nam.